My foot connected with the wood, the cross hit the floor, and I took exactly 2 steps before the world went black. If you want to know what happened in the silence after that, stay with me. And if this story reaches something in you, I would be honored if you subscribed. I am not trying to grow a brand anymore. I just want you to hear this. The live stream counter was at 52,000 when I walked through those doors. I remember seeing the number in the corner of my phone screen and feeling something I can only describe as hunger. Not enough. It was never enough. 52,000 felt like a consolation prize, when 6 months earlier I had hit 400,000 on a single video. The comments used to read like fan mail. They called me brave. They called me the truth teller. They called me the man nobody on the internet was willing to be. That Sunday morning, I was wearing a black hoodie and expensive sneakers that cost more than most people's rent. I had a wireless lapel mic clipped under my collar and a second phone mounted on a stabilizer in my left hand for the wide angle. I had spent the previous night rehearsing exactly what I would say. I had the lines memorized. Karim had approved them. The thumbnail was already designed, waiting in a folder on my laptop back at the apartment. Bold red text, the image of a church. A caption I am not going to repeat here, because I am genuinely ashamed of it now. I walked into St. Anthony's on a morning when the pews were full. I had chosen this church specifically because it was beautiful. That sounds strange, I know, but I had learned early in my career that context mattered for impact. An empty church at night would read as theater. A full mass on a Sunday morning with families and children and an elderly priest at the altar, that would read as confrontation. And confrontation was my entire business model. The choir was singing. I remember that. There were maybe 12 of them, a mix of older women and a couple of teenagers, and the sound they made together was the kind of sound that stops a room. It stopped me for just a second, which I remember noticing and then immediately suppressing. I was not there to be moved. I was there to perform. The comments on my screen were coming fast. I could read them in my peripheral vision. People typing in all caps. People tagging their friends. Someone wrote, "Bro, do it," and got 300 likes in under a minute. The engagement algorithm was waking up. Karim had texted me 3 times already from wherever he was watching. The last message just said, "Go." I moved down the center aisle. People turned. Families, older men, a woman holding a baby on her hip, a row of teenagers who had probably been dragged there by their parents and were now pulling out their own phones to record what was clearly about to happen. Some people stood up. A few people started praying out loud. I could hear it, these low murmured words that seemed to come from everywhere at once, and it created a strange energy in the room that I did not expect. Father Michael stepped forward from the altar. He was older than I imagined from the outside, maybe 70. White hair, thin hands, the kind of face that has spent decades listening to people in the worst moments of their lives. He did not raise his voice. He did not call security. He did not point at me, or condemn me, or reach for his phone. He simply walked to the edge of the sanctuary steps and looked at me the way you look at someone you have known for a long time and are genuinely worried about. He said, "Son, don't do this." That was all. 4 words. And I remember thinking, in real time, that this was actually perfect content. The restraint of it, the gentleness, it was going to make what I did next look even more dramatic by contrast. My audience wanted a villain, and this priest was refusing to give them one, which meant I had to be even more extreme to get the reaction they came for. I told myself that. I had that thought. I want you to understand that I was reasoning, clearly and deliberately, about how to maximize the emotional damage of the next 5 seconds for an audience I could not even see. I stepped past him. I kicked the wooden cross. It hit the stone floor with a sound I still hear sometimes when it is too quiet. And then I took 2 steps, and my legs stopped working, and I went down. I did not trip. I did not slip. There was no external force that I could identify. No one near me. Nothing wrong with the floor. My knees simply stopped holding me up, and I dropped the way a building drops when the supports are cut from beneath it. Straight down, without warning, without time to catch myself. The stream cut out when my phone hit the ground. I know this because people told me later. 52,000 viewers watched the feed go to black, and then spent the next 6 hours debating what had happened in the comments sections of every re-upload they could find. Some said I fainted from low blood sugar. Some said it was staged. Some said it was God. One guy made a 40-minute breakdown video about the physics of how I fell. None of them knew what I experienced next, because I have never told anyone the full version of it until now. What I am about to describe to you I am not asking you to explain. I am not asking you to validate it, or categorize it, or tell me what it was. I am only telling you what happened. The church disappeared. Not gradually. One moment I was on the stone floor, and the next moment I was standing in a place that had no walls, no ceiling, no floor that I could feel, but somehow still stood on. No sound, no phone in my hand, no mic on my collar, no camera angle to consider, no comment feed to monitor, no Kareem texting me from somewhere with a thumbs up. Just silence. I had not experienced silence in years. Real silence. The kind where you can hear yourself breathe. The kind where your own thoughts come back to you at full volume without anything to drown them out. I had been filling every quiet moment for so long, with notifications, with background music, with the low hum of video editing, with the sound of my own recorded voice playing back through monitors, that I had forgotten silence felt like this. It felt like standing at the edge of something. I turned around, the way you turn when you feel someone watching you. He was there. I want to be precise about this, because I know how it sounds. I know what people do with this kind of description. They file it away under hallucination, or wish fulfillment, or stress-induced psychosis, or the particular kind of story people tell after a public humiliation, to reframe the narrative. I cannot control what you do with what I am about to tell you. I can only tell you that when I say, he was there, I mean a person was standing in front of me, real and present, not glowing, not theatrical, not surrounded by any of the imagery I would have mocked on camera 6 months earlier. He was just there, looking at me, and I knew who it was. I want to tell you that I reacted with dignity, that I said something meaningful or at least coherent. But what actually happened is that I took a step backward, which felt ridiculous even in the moment, because there was nowhere to go, and I said, out loud, the only thing that my brain could produce, which was, I didn't think you were real. He did not answer that directly. He looked at me the way you look at someone who has just said something they have been pretending was not true for a very long time. Then he asked me a question. He said, if no one were watching, who would you be? I opened my mouth. I had an answer ready, or I thought I did. The way I always had an answer ready. The way I had trained myself to never be caught without a response, because silence on camera is dead air, and dead air kills your retention rate. But nothing came out, because for the first time in years, the answer I wanted to give, and the answer that was actually true, were so far apart that I could not paper over the distance between them. Who would I be if no one were watching? I had not been alone in years. Not really. Even in my apartment at 2 in the morning, scrolling through comments, refreshing analytics, lying in my bed staring at the ceiling, I had been performing. Performing for the version of myself that existed in my audience's imagination. Performing the character called Nabil, who was fearless and controversial, and did not care what anyone thought, which was, I was starting to understand, the most exhausting performance in the world, because it required me to care enormously about what everyone thought, while pretending I did not care at all. I said, I don't know. And he said, I know. He told me about a night I had never shared with anyone. Not Amina, not Kareem, not any of the friends I had cycled through as my channel grew, and my personality warped around the algorithm. A night 3 years earlier, when I had sat on the floor of my first real apartment, the one I had just signed a lease on with my first brand deal money, and I had cried for 2 hours without knowing exactly why. Not because I was sad, because I was hollow. Because I had wanted this so badly, and now I had it, and the hollow feeling was still there, and I did not understand why wanting something so much, and getting it, could still leave you feeling like nothing. I had never told anyone about that night. I had covered it the next morning by filming a video about haters and resilience, and the video had done well, and the hollow feeling had gone quiet for a few days, and I had learned from that. I had learned that the hollow feeling went quiet when the numbers went up. So I chased the numbers. He knew about that night. He described the color of the wall I was sitting against. He told me what I had been thinking in the hour before I finally fell asleep. He told me the exact words I had said to myself, words I had never spoken out loud, words I had believed with the particular conviction of someone who does not want to believe something, but cannot stop. He said, you believed that if you were not useful to someone's entertainment, you did not exist. I did not argue. I could not. Because it was true, and I knew it was true. And the strange, devastating thing about someone knowing your most private true thing, and saying it aloud, is that it does not feel like an accusation. It feels like finally being seen. I asked him why he was here. Of all the things happening in the world at that moment, why was he here with me? A man who had spent 3 years mocking everything he stood for, who had built a career on performing contempt for his followers and his church and his name. He said, "Because this is the moment you've been close to for a long time, and I wanted to be here for it." I started to shake. I am not proud of this, but I am going to tell you because I said I would be honest. I stood in that place with no walls and no ceiling and no audience, and I started crying, the way you cry when you have been holding something for so long that your body has forgotten it was there, until suddenly it isn't anymore. Not the kind of crying that photographs well. The ugly, gasping, completely uncontrolled kind. The kind I would have edited out of any video I had ever made. He did not look away. He did not look uncomfortable. He just stayed. I thought about my mother. She had been gone for 4 years by then, and I had not let myself think about her clearly, because every time I did, I remembered that she had prayed for me every day of her life, and I had spent the last 3 years of hers building a platform that would have broken her heart. I thought about Amina standing in my living room 6 weeks earlier, looking at the framed analytics screenshots I had put on the wall like trophies, and saying, "You don't smile anymore unless the camera is recording." I thought about the friends I had ended relationships with because they didn't bring value to my brand. I thought about every person I had publicly humiliated in a video, people with names and families, people who had said something I disagreed with online, and suddenly found themselves the subject of a viral takedown that followed them for years. I had told myself this was courage, that I was speaking truth to power. But standing there, with no camera, and no comment section, and no algorithm rewarding me for the performance, I could see it for what it had actually been. It had been cruelty, dressed up as conviction, and I had confused the applause for proof that I was right. He said, "What do you want? Not what do you want to post, not what do your sponsors want, not what does your audience want, what do you want?" I said, "I want to stop feeling like I'm disappearing every time the numbers drop." He said, "You won't find the thing you're looking for where you've been looking for it." I said, "I know that now." And I meant it. I did not mean it the way I sometimes meant things on camera, with one eye on the reaction. I meant it the way you mean something, when there is no one to perform it for. I asked him what I was supposed to do, and he told me something I did not expect. He did not give me a plan. He did not give me a content strategy, or a moral framework, or a list of rules. He said, "Start by apologizing to the man you walked past." That was it. Start there. The rest would come from there. I said, "And you'll still be here, after everything I said about you?" He said, "I've been here the whole time." I do not know how long we were there. When I came back, when the white walls of the hospital room replaced the silence, when the fluorescent lights, and the beeping machines, and the nurse checking my blood pressure, pulled me back into ordinary time, it felt like I had been gone for hours. But the doctors later told me I had been unconscious for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. The nurse had kind eyes, and asked me how I was feeling. I told her I was not sure yet. That was the most honest thing I had said out loud in years. My phone was on the table beside the bed. Someone had retrieved it from the church. It had 47 missed calls. Karim. A number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be a television producer. 3 journalists, 2 sponsors, and Amina. I called Amina first. She answered before the first ring finished. She did not say hello. She said, "Are you okay?" And the way she said it, the specific fear in those 3 words, made me understand for the first time in a long time that someone in my life was afraid of losing me, and not my platform. She was afraid of losing me. I said, "I think I'm going to be." Karim came to the hospital that afternoon with a legal pad full of notes. He had already mapped out 3 different narratives we could use: the mysterious collapse angle, the divine intervention angle, which he immediately clarified was for engagement purposes only, the health scare comeback arc. He was talking fast, moving his pen across the paper, talking about the clip going viral, about how the timing was actually incredible, about how we could use this to relaunch me at a higher level than before. I listened to him finish. Then I said, "I'm not going to do any of it." He looked at me the way you look at someone whose phone you think might have fallen in a toilet. I said, "I'm done with this version of the career. All of it." He closed the legal pad. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "You're making a mistake," picked up his things, and left. And that was the last professional conversation we ever had. The clip of me collapsing went everywhere. There were reaction videos, there were debates, there were theologians on podcasts, and scientists on podcasts, and content creators who had never met me, spending 40 minutes dissecting what had happened to my body on that stone floor. The clip hit 40 million views across platforms. Some people called it a staged publicity stunt. Some people called it divine judgment. Some people built entire YouTube channels around debating it. I watched almost none of it. That was the strangest thing. For 3 years, I had refreshed my analytics, the way some people check the weather, constantly, compulsively, needing to know the number at all times, because the number told me whether I was winning or losing, whether I existed or didn't. And now there was the biggest moment of my career playing out across every platform I had ever posted on, and I could not make myself care about the numbers. I cared about something else, about the man I had walked past. I went back to St. Anthony's on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks after it happened. No camera, no mic, no phone in my pocket at all, which felt strange, like going outside without shoes. I wore jeans and a plain sweatshirt, and I walked through the doors of that church with nothing to offer, except the thing I had come to say. Father Michael was in the sanctuary, arranging something near the altar. He looked up when he heard me come in. There was no surprise on his face, which surprised me. I said, "I owe you an apology. I owe this church an apology. I'm sorry for what I did here. I am genuinely, completely sorry, and I'm not here to film it, or post it, or use it for anything. I just needed you to know." He walked down from the sanctuary. He was shorter than I remembered. He stood in front of me for a moment, and then he put his arms around me. No speech, no lecture, no list of conditions, no mention of what I had done, or who I had been online, or how many people had seen what happened. Just a man who had been a priest for 40-some years, whose job was to understand the difference between a person and their worst moment, holding on to me the way you hold on to someone who has been away for a very long time. I stood there, and I let it happen. And something moved in my chest that I did not have a name for. I started attending services, not to be seen, not to post about it. The first time I told anyone, it was Amina, and she was quiet on the phone for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Tell me everything." And I did, for the first time, the whole story, the encounter, the question, the 4 minutes and 11 seconds that felt like hours. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished she said, "I've been praying for you for 3 years. I didn't know what I was praying for exactly. I just knew you were lost." I lost the apartment. The sponsors had already been nervous, and after I refused every interview request and stopped posting entirely, they left one by one. Karim had managed the contracts, and when Karim left, nobody was left to manage them. And within 4 months, the income was gone. I moved into a smaller place on the other side of the city, significantly smaller. The kind of place where you can hear your neighbors through the walls. I sold most of my equipment. 3 cameras, 2 lighting rigs, the drone, the stabilizer, the audio interface with 12 inputs I had never used more than 2 of at once. I kept 1 camera, a solid mid-range mirrorless that I had used for my very first videos. Before the sponsorships and the upgrade cycle, I kept it because it was the camera I had used when I still thought the work itself mattered, before I started optimizing everything for the algorithm. I started filming again slowly. Not myself, not my face, not my opinions. I started filming other people. A woman named Gloria, who ran a food pantry out of the basement of a church in a neighborhood most people drove through without stopping. I spent 3 weeks with her, filming the way the volunteers showed up every Saturday morning, the way families came through the line, the way Gloria knew almost everyone by name and asked about their kids, their jobs, their mothers. I turned it into a 20-minute documentary and posted it with no thumbnail text, no hook, no controversy. Just Gloria's name in the title. It got 4,000 views in the first month. I had videos that got 4 million in an afternoon, and I sat with that 4,000 number and felt something I had not felt about a video in years, which was that the number did not determine how much the video mattered. 4,000 people had watched Gloria work. Some of them had shared it with someone. A few of them had commented saying they did not know places like that existed in their city, and one of them said they had started volunteering somewhere nearby after watching it. 4,000. And something real had happened. Daniel Cruz found me through that video. He had been at the church the morning I collapsed. He was the videographer who volunteered there, and he had filmed the whole thing on a camera he happened to have in his bag. He had never posted the footage, a fact I did not learn for months and still think about. He had kept it, uncertain what to do with it, and when he saw the Gloria documentary, he tracked down my contact information and sent me a message that said only, "Your new work is better." We ended up talking for 3 hours the first time. He was quieter than I expected, the kind of person who thinks before they speak and means what they say when they do. He became the kind of friend I had not had since before the channel. The kind you call when something actually matters, not when you need someone in the background of a photo. My following had dropped from 3.5 million to just under 200,000 by the end of the first year. The 200,000 who stayed were people who wanted to watch the documentaries. They were not there for controversy. They were there for Gloria, and for the family I filmed rebuilding their kitchen after a fire, and for the former gang member turned elementary school teacher I spent a month following, and for the small congregation in a neighborhood that nobody covers that was quietly doing extraordinary things with almost no resources. I got a comment on that last one from a woman who said she was the teacher's sister, that she had not spoken to him in 11 years, that watching the video had made her pick up the phone, that she was going to see him the following weekend for the first time since they were both in high school. I read that comment 3 times. Then I sat with it for a while. That is the moment I keep coming back to when I think about what changed. Not the collapse, not the encounter, not the apology, or the lost sponsors, or the smaller apartment. This moment, a woman I had never met reading a story I had told about a man she had lost, and finding the courage to call him. I had been the thing in the middle. Not the story, not the miracle, just the person who turned on the camera and stayed quiet long enough for the truth to come through. That is a different kind of work than what I used to do. It requires a different kind of strength. Not the kind that goes looking for a fight and calls it courage. The kind that sits still, pays attention, and trusts that what is real does not need to be made louder to matter. Years have passed. I am not famous the way I was famous. My name does not trend. Nobody debates me in comment sections anymore. The chapter of my life that people remember, if they remember me at all, is the clip of a young man in a black hoodie dropping to the floor of a church. But the people who have been watching since then remember something else. They remember Gloria. They remember the teacher and his sister. They remember the family with the kitchen. I remember the silence. I remember being asked a question that I could not answer without telling the truth. I remember 4 minutes and 11 seconds that changed every minute that came after. Father Michael passed away 2 years ago. I was at the service. I sat in the same church where I had come to do the worst thing I had ever done publicly, and I listened to people describe a man who had spent his entire adult life in quiet, consistent service, who had never gone viral, who had never had a sponsorship or a personal brand, who had buried people and married people and sat with the dying and counseled the struggling, and who, by every measure I used to use, had lived an invisible life. The church was full, standing room only. People had driven from 3 states away. People who had been in his congregation 30 years ago were there. People he had helped through grief and addiction and family collapse and loneliness were there. A woman stood up during the service and said that he had changed her life with 4 words, and she did not say what the 4 words were, and she did not need to. I thought about the 4 words he had said to me. Son, don't do this. He had known what I was there to do. He had walked toward me anyway. He had not reached for his phone. He had not tried to become the story. He had just offered me the one thing that was actually his to give, which was his presence and his restraint and his refusal to respond to cruelty with anything other than compassion. I cried at his funeral. Not the ugly kind this time, though that is not entirely true. Mostly the kind you cry when something ends that you did not fully understand until it was over. I have thought about what I would say if I could speak to the version of myself that walked through those doors with a lapel mic and a second phone and 52,000 people watching. I think I would say this. The thing you are trying to prove does not become more true the louder you say it. The thing you are actually afraid of does not go away when the numbers go up. You are not disappearing when the views drop. You are disappearing the entire time you are chasing them. And whatever you are looking for, you will not find it where you are looking. But it is possible to find it. I know because I did. It started with being asked one question in a place with no walls. If this story stayed with you, I would be glad if you subscribed. Not to my old channel, to this one. The one where nothing trends but some things change. There are 2 more videos on your screen right now that carry the same spirit as this one. Stories about real people, told plainly, because that is the only kind of story I know how to tell anymore. Click one of them. Stay a while. I will see you in the next one.